All right, first clap on 3. 1, 2, 3. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of True Crime and Cocktails. We're so glad that you're here. As always, I am your host, Lauren Ash, and as always, I am joined by my co-hostess with the mostess, Christy Oxborrow. How you feeling?
I'm doing great.
Fantastic.
How are you doing?
I'm exhausted.
Of course.
You know what it is that
Mm.
I thought I had known what tired is.
Mm.
And then the exhaustion fairy, well, that right there is a
Yeah.
sign of my tired level. Said, "Hold my beer," is the point.
Mm.
I'm currently in production on season 2 of Not Dead Yet, which at this point you can stream the first episode
Yeah.
of season 2. Beautiful. Um, we're going at a pace that can be best described as built to kill.
Yeah.
Built to kill. So
Mhm.
it's just been a little unrelenting. And I've done this. I was saying this to my boyfriend earlier. I was like, I've done this job for a long time. I've been on like an American TV show for
Yeah.
basically the past 10 years. I've been on one or another, and this is a lot.
Yeah.
And look,
Yeah.
it's not a negative. It just is. You know what I mean? It's like it just is.
Sure.
And so again, we're working against the clock. Obviously the strikes last year kind of were unfortunate in terms of scheduling, and so yeah, we're just in it. We're just in it.
Mhm. You're
Yeah.
doing great.
Thanks so much. I have a 3:30 wake up tomorrow.
Mhm.
Yeah. But you know what? I'm here. I'm with my best
Yes.
gal. I'm going to learn about a serial killer I've never heard of before. I mean, I'm too blessed to be stressed is the point.
And this is coming out on Galentine's,
And that's nice.
isn't it?
I think Galentine's, people are throwing it around a little. You know what I mean? It's any
Oh, sure.
day. And listen, by that I'm grateful to have that also. But we have to remember it is a statutory holiday in our universe.
Of course.
February 13th, baby.
Yes. Well, I'm here
That's a
for
beautiful
it.
thing.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing. To all the gals out there and
Yeah.
all their gal pals, happy Galentine's.
Oh, what I wouldn't give if groups are getting together
Yeah.
for like a mimosa,
Sure.
margarita, whether alcohol, virgin or not, either
Yep.
way.
Mhm.
Just like getting together for like a brunch
Yep.
and listening to me talk about a very brutal killer.
Yeah. We hope you're celebrating Galentine's in the traditional way. Sit around with some gal pals with a non alcoholic or alcoholic beverage and sit in silence listening to us wax poetic about a killer.
Yeah,
That's a beautiful thing.
yeah. Look, I can imagine worse days.
We do it for fun and as a job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I was gonna say we come by it honestly, but I'm like, I mean, we were raised by unsolved mysteries.
Yeah.
What what else were we gonna do
It
in
does
our adult
feel
years?
it does feel full circle that it came to this eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, the fact that there's supposed to be new unsolved mysteries at some point this year, which the last time they announced it for what, season 3?
Yeah.
I was like, "Yes, I'm ready." And then I watched them and went, "All right."
I think what it is that first season of the Netflix one
Mm.
was so good.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was the first season of our show
It was.
on
Yeah.
the Unsolved Mysteries edition. How beautiful. Um, and then the second season, we were still okay with. And then the third season was
Yeah.
the one where we were like, what's happening here?
There were a couple in there where you were like, "This, yep, here we go. This
Yeah.
is a good one." And then there were some that were like, "Okay,
Yeah.
and that's it." And it's tough. I just feel Unsolved Mysteries is such a specific type of show or specific type of case that they're looking for. And I just don't know that they hit it the third time.
What I wonder is it the turnaround? because I don't know how much time
Oh.
they had to get that first season out, but then the first season did so well that then was it like, all right, let's go. The next season, they may have already been kind of working on that.
Oh,
I'm
sure.
writing a story right now.
Of
But
course.
again,
It's
maybe
what we
season
do.
2, it was like, here's the ones that didn't make season 1, but they're already kind of, half on the go.
Sure.
Season 3, it could have been like, ooh, we're starting from scratch.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it read that way. I'm so spicy.
Yo. Oh,
I'm
I'm
so out of it.
for it.
It should also be noted, we're in the midst of something they're calling an atmospheric river in Los Angeles. Have you heard this?
What does that even mean?
What it
It's like
means,
flooding?
yeah, it means that we're basically under siege. Um, the bulk of the city is under flash flood warnings.
Oh,
One of the first listed, my neighborhood, my
of
area, of
course.
course.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's roads that are out. Even
Oh,
today I was driving to work and I realized I went through I can take freeways to get there or I can go through the hills. And I went through the hills and as I was driving I was like, "What am I doing?" There's mudslides everywhere. There's news teams, news vans set up with a like, "I'm Peter Pie in the sky and I'm here on the scene of absolute carnage." Canadian gal's trying to make her way to work, risking her life. They've literally told us, by the way, the mayor has said, don't leave your homes unless absolutely necessary. The
no.
governor has called a state of emergency. But you know who doesn't stop? Television.
Well, no, because when you're stuck at home, you gotta have something to watch.
Exactly. So television productions still up and running, risking the lives of everyone. I'm kidding.
Again,
I'm
I
kidding.
mean, you guys were considered, during the pandemic, you had to film.
We did. Yeah, we
Not
did.
everybody, but your show certainly had to.
Yeah. Yeah, and you
Yeah,
know what? In a sense, that is an honor because why do you become an actor? Why do you do this work? Why do we create entertainment? Well, it is for the betterment of others and all of the above, and
sure.
it does feel like in a sense that is an essential service or whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's I think it's this I think I'm just broken.
I just I feel like, is it great for you to entertain and bring joy and whatever to other people? Yeah,
Yeah.
but maybe less so when it, like, affects your safety,
Yeah.
maybe?
Yeah. I think this too
Mm.
is like this is one of those tough ones currently because it's been going on for so many days,
Oh,
and I think we keep thinking it's almost over, if that makes sense. So it's
of
like, "Oh,
course.
it'll be better by tomorrow," and then it's like, "Oh, no, it's still going." Like the rain has not stopped at this point for 72 hours, I wanna say.
I see.
Yeah, and it's again, as I've talked about before, like, people also have to remember, like, Los Angeles specifically is not built for it because 10 years ago, the first year I moved here, there was 1
Hmm.
day of rain out of 365. Now, that put the city into a great drought. That's not what I'm saying is ideal either. But we've gone from that to having these week-long stretches of heavy rain. I mean, one area here got 10 inches in like half a day of rain.
God.
Yeah. There's some people I know that are basically trapped in their homes. People that live in the hills. They're like, well, I can't get out. The roads are all flooded. So I guess I'm in here for now.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's wild.
I mean, I basically live like I'm trapped in my home. I'm I'm not, but,
We're house arrested by choice. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, look, do you sometimes consider, like, committing a light collar crime just so you have an excuse to not leave? Sometimes. But, yeah, it's like you open the door, you shove the children out, and then you get on the couch, and then that's just where you stay to work until the kids come home. And I understand if we all had to stay and they would also be home,
Right.
which, you know, affects the workday because it's constant like he needs a snack, he needs this, whatever. And then they suddenly remembered everything they've never told you. And you're just like, oh, yeah, yeah. And then they're like, once in the second grade. And I'm like, yeah, man, let's hear it. Because I never want them to think I'm not interested, so I always am like, "Oh, okay, bud, what's up?" And I'll always stop what I'm doing to listen to what they have to say. And then their videos. Their little videos, the little sounds and the screams that they can handle watching, and they're giggling away, and I'm just like, "We're gonna do that here, huh? We have a we have a real cozy basement. You can just pop down there,
Fully finished.
pop down there and hang out." Um, yeah, no, it's a joy and a treat to have them around. It's just a lot sometimes when people are
There's
like, "You work from home, you don't have to, leave your house to go to work," and it's like, "That is great." But also I don't have an official start and stop time of my day. My day
Yeah,
just kind of continues regardless.
it bleeds.
Yeah, it does. And look, because of that, we're here today.
How beautiful. Now you told me before we started you got some updates for us.
I do.
Wow.
One I learned about a couple of days ago. One I learned about this afternoon. And then one that it's not so much an update as something I feel like I have to mention and I don't want to, and so I'm just gonna and then move on.
Can't wait.
So first of all, with an update from an episode that we recorded, I do believe, shit, what season was that? I'm gonna say it was either the first episode of season 3 or the first episode of season 4. I genuinely do not recall which one. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The point is, within the last few days, I learned about it this afternoon, but that doesn't matter. It was specifically announced that Yolanda Saldivar was going to be up for parole in May 2025. For those who may not recall who she is, Yolanda fatally shot 90s pop sensation Selena Quintanilla in March 1995. It
Right.
seems Yolanda was driven to murder after Selena discovered Yolanda had been embezzling from Selena's clothing boutiques. Selena was 23 at the time of her death. Yolanda was eventually sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 30 years. So, meaning, of course, yes, she will be eligible for parole next year. Yolanda is featured in a new crime doc series that is coming out on Oxygen. Honestly, I have no interest in hearing what that woman has to say.
Yeah.
There is nothing she could say that would make me go, I get it. Or, okay, sure, she should be out. Um, Yolanda is currently 63 years old. And as far as I'm concerned, prison can keep her because you know who will never get to be 63? Selena.
Yeah.
And so, not interested. But if you're interested in hearing more on Selena's case, or if you just want to hear me awkwardly attempt a lot of Spanish, check out episode 89.
And if you'd like to hear me awkwardly attempt a lot of Spanish, go over to my TikTok or my Instagram. There's a bit of a viral video over there. It's a lot of fun.
That was such a beautiful segue I had not anticipated.
I had to run with it.
Of course,
You lobbed me a
I
softball and
I
I
would
just
have
had to
been
go.
upset if you hadn't.
I had to swing. Well, my question to this, first of all, by the way,
Yeah.
did Yolanda hire whatever PR person Gypsy Rose hired? Because Gypsy Rose started doing did that documentary, the new one about her where she speaks,
Oh, sure.
whatever it was. It feels like she probably was filming it about a year before she was meant to get out.
Oh, and then
It
maybe it's like, look at this, and I feel bad, and look at my life now, and I'm ready to move
right.
on. And then they see that and go, okay, let her out.
That feels like an interesting coincidence, doesn't it?
It does.
Both women, I mean, Gypsy Rose obviously didn't physically do the killing herself, but like both women
Sure.
charged with murder, um, doing true crime documentaries that they're speaking in around a year before they're set to get. Now, granted, she may not get out. She may be denied parole, right?
Sure. And I'd love that for her.
Yeah. Interesting. I just had to point that out.
Oh, no, there's something about it, I'm sure.
Something feels up to me.
Because it's also, you can't tell me that the documentary people, I went there, you can't tell me that they didn't purposely plan out the timing
Right.
of like, this will come out like a year before, and then like the final thing will be she's up for parole at this point, and it's like, yeah, great. And see, with Gypsy Rose, I mean, she didn't physically do it, but at the same time, what she went through
Yeah.
versus the person who just stole money from someone who she said was her best friend and then
Yeah.
killed her when the friend confronted her about it.
Oh, 100%. I'm not comparing their crimes
Oh, no.
at all. But yes, I hear you. It's well, I guess the other thing is like I now see, and this is how they get you because I'm like, I'm almost curious to watch it because she's such a villain. Selena was so beloved,
Yeah.
obviously, by fans at the time. But I feel like even to this day, it's like there's such a lore of like, oh, like anytime you heard the name Selena, it's like, oh God, like she was a child when she was killed, basically, right?
Yeah.
And so again, I'm like, I don't know that anyone like Gypsy Rose obviously is a sympathetic figure, whether wherever you land on it, right? Like she was a
Sure.
victim of torture her entire life. Uh this is interesting. It's like to your point, it's like, well, what is it about this woman's story that's going to potentially try and make us have compassion? Is that what we're to find out? Should we watch?
Well, I was just double checking on the title. It is called Selena and Yolanda, The Secrets Between Them.
Oh no. Oh,
So
this
yeah, they're
feels
they're absolutely trying to reel you in to be like there because there's going to be something that they're like, I mean, who knows what they'll say. I'm sure it'll be like oh, she was treated so poorly by her and
right.
all of this where it's like, I don't care what this woman says.
Yeah,
She was a 23-year-old girl.
I know.
Like, get out of town.
Yeah.
But oh yeah, she's absolutely looking for sympathy and it'll be like, look at how hard things have been for me since, look at this. And it's like, mm-hmm. I mean, here's the
Wowzer.
thing. I'd be a terrible judge or terrible person to put on like a jury, which is part of the reason they never have me. Or even like the panel for like getting out and an appeal and all of that, because I'd just be like, you did what? No. But they're a super good person now. No. No, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Because also she'd get out and then you can't tell me she's not gonna go Gypsy Rose and go do all the interviews. And it's like, no, I don't you can't tell me this woman didn't make money off doing this documentary.
I think you have to be paid. Maybe not. I think you do. I think there's some rules that you have to be paid, but I could be wrong. I don't know
Mm.
how it works. Like, I don't know how are you allowed to make money when you're in jail? I don't know. I don't know how that works.
Oh, sure. I mean, it could also be, oh, I wonder if it would be like, we'll give it to somebody else, like a family member or something, and then you get it when you come out, or we'll give you the check when you come out. Who knows?
Yeah, does it go into a trust or something?
But I absolutely could see her being like, I will do this to get out because the
Yes.
timing is too wild.
Yes.
Also, it's been 30 years, but we're still pissed.
Yeah.
So bye, Yolanda.
Bye.
Not interested.
No.
Not interested at all. Ah, so another case that we did more recently uh than episode 89. It's weird to think of episodes under 100 now.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like it took forever to get to 100, and since then they're just flying by.
Yeah.
I don't even know how that works. So, we did an episode about a serial killer named Herb Baumeister.
Oh, right.
I mentioned that in 1996, 10,000 pieces of human remains were discovered at Baumeister's former home, an 18-acre estate called Fox Hollow Farm, located in Westfield, Indiana. One of his victims was previously identified through dental records, but the family requested that the investigators do a more thorough test to compare it with DNA because they wanted to be for sure that their loved one was in fact a victim. The DNA results have come back. The remains did, in fact, belong to 34-year-old Manuel Resendez, who initially disappeared in August 1993. So he was already on the suspected victims list, but now we have for sure, we know without a doubt. And if you're interested, that was episode 142, which somehow feels like 8 years ago and yesterday.
Yeah,
I
I
have
get that.
nothing else to base that on. I also want you to know I did write down Peter Pie in the sky because I liked that a
Thank
lot.
you.
I liked that a lot. Now, this is not an update because we've never talked about this before, but it involves someone who I have talked about very lovingly on this program. I'm just
Oh,
running
no.
with calling it a program.
It is a program.
It is.
God damn it.
I just want you to know how much I don't want to talk about it, but I also absolutely have to talk about it. So, this also happened within the last few weeks, but 5 professional hockey players have been charged with a sexual assault that allegedly occurred in June 2018 following a Hockey Canada banquet in London, Ontario. The players at the time were part of the gold medal winning Canadian team. The case was initially closed without charges in 2019. It was reopened 3 years later. In the past few weeks, there have been so much speculation about this. It was just recently announced that all 5 players allegedly involved have been charged. The players include Dylan Dubé of the Calgary Flames, Carter Hart of the Philadelphia Flyers, Michael McLeod and Cal Foote of the New Jersey Devils, and Alex Fermenton. He once played for Ottawa, but more recently has been playing professionally in Switzerland. I have said allegedly a lot throughout this case because there has not been an official verdict, and I'm scared of lawyers. But let it be known, we believe victims and we stand with victims on this show. If these players, if what they're being accused of is true, I hope that justice is served, regardless as to who they are. If the allegations are true, I am so deeply disappointed and outright devastated to think that someone that I have been such a fan of could be involved in anything like this. I think of my boys as my kids. In some respect, half the team I could have birthed age-wise, so I think of them as my kids. And so it's devastating. And this news has been really tough to take. But since I have mentioned Carter's name on this show before, I felt I had to mention these allegations because it would have been weird for me not to.
Yeah.
All 5 players involved were given indefinite leave by their individual teams. The case will be heard in court in April of this year. And while no one listening to our show has possibly been able to escape hearing me mention my beloved Philadelphia Flyers, who have been my team since June 1997 and will be my team for life. Some may have specifically missed the moment where I mentioned Carter. It was a few episodes ago. I'm not going to go find out which one because it doesn't matter. But the point is, because over the last few months, I've been ending each episode saying goodnight to a different member of the Flyers roster for the sake of manifesting a Stanley Cup run. It's who I am. I will continue to do it. So it's, yes, I've said his name. It was long before any of this came out and before I knew of any of it. So, yeah, my point is I'm not gonna stop mentioning the Flyers because it has nothing to do with them, and I'm not gonna stop listing off the players because God, I need that Stanley Cup run harder
Of
this year
course.
than any year prior. But yeah, it would have been weird not to mention it. So now it's mentioned, and there we go. I didn't get into
Fantastic.
the specifics of it because my God, what those gentlemen, not gentlemen, are accused of is pretty vile.
Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's hope that justice is served.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
The fact that this happened in 2018 and they're just getting to it, like it's a whole thing about cover-ups and what Hockey
Mm-hmm.
Canada's been doing. And yeah, I'm sure there could be a whole episode about it. But for now,
Well, we'll have
you've
to see how
mentioned
it all
that.
shakes out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, but it's a tough blow. I'll say.
Yes.
It's a tough blow. But
Well, I'm sorry
you
that
know,
they let you down.
he did specifically.
Yep.
I don't know the other jokers. The
Thank
other
you for
jokers.
jokers.
Oh, look, anyone who treats anybody else in a bad way, I feel lets me down personally.
Of course.
But specifically someone that I loved and respected. It was really bad. It was
Yeah.
especially because I've been saying for the last couple of months, he got sick and injured in like November or late November-ish. And so he missed a chunk of time. And when he came back, something just wasn't right. And he was off. And it was like he just wasn't up to where he was normally. Something was going on. And then if he was on the bench, you could see it in his eyes. Something was off. And I kept saying, something's going on with him mentally. This isn't right. I just know. And then they suddenly announce he's taking leave indefinitely. And I was like, see, I told you, I knew it. Something's going on with him mentally that's been screwing with his game. Something's going on. And then this came out that's why everyone's taking leave. And I just, I mean, I was right.
Yep. You were.
Just didn't see that. Didn't see that coming. I expect more from my boys.
I
Is all I'm
expect
saying.
more from all men.
Thank you very much. Thank you for correcting me in that. Yes.
No, this wasn't
My
just an
God,
addition.
yes.
Just an addition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and everyone should expect more from
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
time. It's time. Let's all be better.
Let's just be better.
Yes.
Let's remind everyone that, again, the narrative of teaching women how to protect themselves against assaults should not be as loud as the narrative of teaching young men not to assault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Feels like that's a concept that it's wild, is still not commonly discussed or thought about in 2024.
No. Like I can't remember his name and it doesn't matter because I won't say it even if I could remember. But oh, that curly-haired kid, um, I believe he assaulted a woman while she was unconscious. And he was like a swimmer or something. It was a college thing. Um, and I think he was found guilty. And they were like, oh, you're gonna ruin his life.
Yep.
And I'm like, who the fuck cares? You think her life is great? Oh, I don't like when anything wrongdoing happens because then I get spicy and angry. But when a man is involved and tries to pull the, well, what about me? Then oh, ah, like then I could lead an army. You know what I mean? like then she's gonna see red.
Yeah. Well, listen, you lead that army. I'll be the first in line.
Oh, if you think you're not gonna help me lead this thing,
Let me
but
be the
our army
Riker
is
to your
gonna be all
your Picard, okay?
our army is just gonna end up being us laying on a couch recording TikToks. Like
So
it's
many snacks.
oh, food invasion. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, before we get into it, what you drinking
Yeah.
over there? Something fun?
Nope. You would think so, but I've been blessed with such a small amount of time in this year already, and I'm already back on medication that I can't drink. Um, so I've got a Coke and a water.
Yeah, I've got a Diet Coke and a water, but also just like such a steady stream of these Kinder Mini chocolate wrappers. Like
Oh,
I'm basically drinking these down. So
the Kinder Minis. I'd like to talk about whatever that innard is.
Yeah,
That maybe
absolutely.
wasn't the way to say it, but that, like, it's not a chocolate. They just call it like a milk something. I don't know what it is. I'm here for it.
Yep,
I'm here for it. And have you had the
absolutely.
the little Kinder, the little mini eggs where inside it's just
Yep.
like with a bit of hazelnut?
Hmm.
Fuck yeah. Like that's
Have you
this is
had,
why this is why our army is going to be snack based.
again, the army's, it's going to take some time to get things going, but we'll get there. We'll get there once we've eaten.
Yeah.
Um, have you at Christmas? I had these little Kinder ones. They were in the shape of penguins, and
Okay.
inside of them was the beautiful white stuff that we don't know what it
Of
is,
course.
and cookie bits, like a cookies and cream situation.
Oh, okay.
It's a 12 out of 10.
Oh, I like this. Just so you know, our
Yeah.
the logo for our army has to feature a raccoon.
Yeah. Because they also
Ah,
fight. A raccoon will mess you up.
hey.
Yeah.
Oh,
It
that
also is,
somehow makes sense.
it's also lazy and eats a lot. But yeah, if pushed, get out of town.
See, and that's the key. We're normal, decent broads who like a
Mhm.
snack. But if you push us,
Yeah.
that's when we attack. Oh my God, we're raccoons.
Well, on that note, we're of course discussing on this episode the Casanova Killer, again, a serial killer I've never heard of before, which for me is a big deal, and I cannot wait to learn more. So let's get everybody, including myself, up to speed right now. The Casanova Killer is the nickname that was given to Paul John Knowles, a serial killer who terrorized America in the early 70s. In a span of less than 4 months, Knowles abducted, assaulted, and killed multiple people across 8 different states. He was described as worse than Ted Bundy because his MO constantly changed and his victims included men, women, and children. The authorities believe that Knowles was responsible for the deaths of nearly 20 people, although he claims that the real number is closer to 35. So, who was the Casanova Killer? Who were his victims? And how was he finally stopped? Christy Oxborrow investigates.
I'll be honest, I don't remember how I heard of him, but it was recent. I
Okay.
don't know if I was specifically looking for like a place or specifically looking for like a serial killer or something, but I ended up coming across him. But prior to that, no knowledge whatsoever. But
Listen, I'm all for it.
that's it's the whole point of doing this. We get we get something different. So disclaimer. Um, because we're talking about a serial killer, I'm not getting away without a disclaimer. This episode will contain mentions of rape, so trigger warning for those who need it. Now, on November 7th, 1974, 45-year-old Sandy Fox arrived in Atlanta, Georgia on a work trip. She was a journalist from the UK in America for a 1-month tryout with an American weekly newspaper. The day prior, Sandy had spent the day in Washington, D.C., unsuccessfully trying to get an interview with former Vice President, oh, I'm going to missay this, Spiro Agnew? Is that
Oh, right. Yeah.
is that how I couldn't even
I
tell
think
you what
that's
he
right.
looks like. Doesn't matter. So, so Sandy gets to Atlanta. She is discouraged because, of course, didn't get the interview she was hoping for. So she went to the Holiday Inn bar to have drinks with some colleagues. At the bar, Sandy met 28-year-old restaurateur Daryl Golden. Sandy described Daryl as ruggedly handsome and, quote, a cross between Robert Redford and Ryan O'Neal.
Wow.
For our younger listeners, Ryan O'Neal and Robert Redford are both actors. O'Neal is most known for the movies Love Story and Paper Moon, while Redford is most known for The Natural and The Horse Whisperer. Should I have chosen something other than The Horse Whisperer? Probably, but that one for some reason is in my soul. But speaking of my soul, for me, Robert Redford will always be Warren from the 1996 tearjerker Up Close and Personal. It also stars the always stunning Michelle Pfeiffer. And if you've seen it, just know I have not seen it for decades. But when I close my eyes, I can still see the shot of Warren's boots at the airfield, and it haunts me. I can't think about it. Oh, that movie's heartbreaking. So, my point is, Michelle Pfeiffer is timeless, and I will not accept any other opinions on that matter.
I like that.
So, Sandy meets Daryl. He tells her he's 28. Remember, I said she's 45.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter. But Sandy later said she wasn't sure about him right away because at the time, her ideal range for men was early to mid 20s. Again, she was 45. No shade. I mean, in fact, outright kudos to her for knowing what she liked and going for it.
But she was suggesting that 28 was a little old for her.
She was suggesting maybe he was out of her range, just not interested.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
look, she knew what she wanted.
Yep.
Kudos. So apparently, Daryl asked Sandy to dance. They spent the night drinking and flirting. One thing leads to another. They spend the night together. Sandy would later say the sex was disappointing because Daryl struggled to get an erection. I only specifically mention that detail because it will be important later on.
Okay.
So Sandy tells Daryl that she has to go to West Palm Beach, Florida the following day. And Daryl says, well, hell, I'm headed to Miami, which is only like 72 miles or 117 kilometers south of West Palm Beach. So he offers to drive her. And for whatever reason, she's like, yeah, cool. Even though it was like 599 miles away.
Yeah.
She's like, I barely know this guy, but hey, you do you. So on the trip, Daryl told Sandy that he believed he would be dead within a year. Didn't give a reason, just said he just believed his life was going to be short. That was it. And then Sandy said that she was a journalist. And then Daryl was like, weird. Maybe you could write a book about me someday. Again, that'll come up. Sandy and Daryl arrive in West Palm Beach on November 10th. But he didn't just drop her off where she needed to go and then leave. He like drove her to where she had to go and then just sat in the car for hours and waited till she was done and then drove her somewhere else. Later that night, Sandy and Daryl had drinks with some journalists that Sandy knew. It was there that Sandy just kind of up and ended things with Daryl. She told him she was heading back to London soon. It didn't make sense for them to continue. After Sandy left, a fellow journalist and his wife sat with Daryl for a few hours because they kind of felt sorry for him. The next day, Daryl offered to drive the journalist's wife, Susan Mackenzie, to a hair appointment. I have a lot of questions about that, but I'll let it go. Susan accepted the ride, but on the drive, Daryl said something was wrong and he pulled the car over. When Susan questioned him, Daryl pulled out a gun and then demanded that she have sex with him.
Ooh.
Susan refused. She quickly got out of the car, but he grabbed her by the hair and tried to drag her to a nearby wooded area. She managed to get away. She flagged down a passing driver who drove Susan to a nearby payphone. For our younger listeners, back in the day, there used to be these public phones placed around random locations. Local calls cost a quarter. I'm just trying to bring back that moment from earlier.
Of course. I loved it.
I lived for a bit.
Oh, listen,
I
I was
mean,
like, I think
we
this is
know.
just good educational information.
I mean, there's going to be someone out there that's like, a quarter? Wow. Okay.
It's not a bad deal.
Right? So Susan calls the police. Daryl flees the scene. Police put out an APB for the red Chevy Impala that Daryl was last seen driving. The Impala was spotted by a squad car who pulled Daryl over, but when the officer got near the car, Daryl pulled out a sawed-off shotgun, and the officer chose to duck for cover and Daryl fled the scene. The officer chose the right move, by the way. I didn't mean to sound like he had not. So the police call Sandy Fox to ask if she's heard from Daryl. She says no. They say, well, they're like, do you know Susan McKenzie? And she's like, yeah, she's my colleague's wife. And they responded, your friend attempted to rape her this morning. Sandy's response, and I quote, good God. And he wasn't even a good poke.
Well, Sandy, there's
Not the time, Sandy.
not the point. It's a
It's
weird thing to say, but
It
anyway.
is a weird thing to say. But okay. Yeah. Okay. So, a few days later, police find the red Chevy Impala. It's hidden in a carport. Daryl abandoned the vehicle and fled on foot to the home of 31-year-old Beverly Maybe, who was in her backyard taking clothes off a clothesline. Daryl approached her, claiming to be an IRS agent named Bob Williams. Beverly was skeptical, but Daryl pulled out a weapon and then forced Beverly inside her house. Daryl told Beverly he had just committed a robbery and he needed a place to hide. He then asked for her vehicle, but she said her twin sister, Barbara, who would later, her name was Barbara Tucker at the time. She would later become Barbara Abel. Either way. But Barbara had the car. She wouldn't be home until after 5. Daryl then took Beverly, who suffered from cerebral palsy, to a bedroom where he bound her hands behind her back and put a gag in her mouth. It was said that he did attempt to rape her, but I couldn't verify for sure or not. When Barbara returned to the house with her son, Daryl shoved a gun at her and forced her to the bedroom where he tied up the child and then took Barbara outside to her beige Volkswagen Beetle. He pointed a gun at her, told Barbara to drive, and said, we're headed to Georgia. 30 minutes later, Barbara's son managed to free himself and run to a neighbor's house where he called police. The man who the child described matched the description of the man who attempted to attack Susan McKenzie days prior, so police put out an APB for the new vehicle, complete with Daryl's description. And since an abduction was involved in this situation, the FBI, including a hostage negotiator, was dispatched from the nearest field office while Daryl was forcing Barbara out of town. The police were processing that red Chevy Impala that Daryl left behind. In the car, they found various license plates from other states. They found clothing, jewelry, newspaper articles, and vinyl records. When the police ran the Impala's VIN number, they discovered the car belonged to a man named William Bates in Lima, Ohio. Police then used William's credit card receipts to create a timeline and found that that credit card had been used in 37 different states in the past 2 months.
Oh.
But the signature on the receipts did not match the signature that was on file for William, and his photo looked nothing like the description of the man who was seen driving the car. When police went to William's home in Lima, they discovered that William had gone to work on the night of September 3rd and had not been seen or heard from since. So clearly, Daryl had stolen William's car and his credit cards, and when police searched Lima for any sign of William, they found a 1971 yellow Dodge Dart Demon abandoned at a hotel. They ran the VIN number of that car and found it was registered to Alice Curtis, a retired school teacher in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. The vehicle looked as though someone had spent like a lot of time in it, like food wrappers, coffee cups, all of that filling the whole inside. Fingerprints found inside Alice's vehicle matched ones that were found inside William's vehicle. So it was pretty safe to assume that whoever stole William's car also stole Alice's car. But when police looked into Alice, they discovered she was murdered in her home 4 months earlier. So now police knew they weren't only searching for a thief and an abductor, they were also searching for a possible murderer. And when they found an address for Daryl Golden, they discovered the real Daryl had reported his credit card missing weeks prior. So the police realized they did not know the identity of the man that they were searching for who had taken Barbara Abel. However, in the back seat of that Impala, the police got a very lucky break because they discovered some paperwork, or more specifically, the last will and testament of a man named John Paul Knowles.
Wow.
When they searched his name in the criminal database, they discovered a very long list of charges, including kidnapping, auto theft, and burglary. When they showed Barbara's sister Beverly a series of photos, she easily picked out Paul's photo as the man who abducted her sister. So the man who told journalist Sandy Fox that he was 28-year-old Daryl Golden was really 33-year-old Paul John Knowles. So now police knew who they were looking for. If she knew he was 33, would she have for sure said no? It's a question that I have.
Great question.
But Paul John Knowles was born April 25th, 1946, in Orlando, Florida. Not much is known about his childhood, but I do know that his parents were Thomas and Bonnie Knowles, and that they had at least one other son named Bruce. There may have been two more siblings, but I couldn't confirm that. Now, since I'm going to spend the rest of this episode talking about a vicious killer, I'm uncomfortable using his first name, so I'm just going to refer to him as Knowles because it's less familiar.
Mhm.
So at the age of 8, Knowles was caught stealing a bike, and his father disowned him and had the child put up for adoption.
Jesus. Okay.
Again, not much is known about events prior to this. There was also no indication about how his mother felt about this situation because it's only ever mentioned his father kicked the child out. I don't know if the mother agreed or if she just went along with whatever the husband wanted. I don't know. Either way, this was the beginning of Knowles' very long criminal history. His first official arrest happened when he was 19. He kidnapped a police officer who stopped him for a minor traffic violation, which feels like a really over the top response.
Yeah.
By this point, Knowles had a rap sheet 11 years long, full of various petty crimes, and he was back and forth between foster homes and reformatories. Knowles married very young. It didn't last very long. He was in and out of prison. In fact, between 1965, when he was 19, and 1974, he spent at least half of each of those years behind bars, usually for auto theft or burglary. While doing a stint at Rayford Prison in Florida in 1972, he started corresponding with Angela Kovic, a cocktail waitress from San Francisco. The two met through a classified ad placed in a magazine called American Astrology. They
Mhm.
became pen pals, and Angela later said at the time when they first started writing, she'd been struggling in her marriage, which caused her to maybe romanticize those letters. Angela flew from San Francisco to meet Knowles in early 1974. During that first meeting, where again, he's in prison at this point, he proposed to her and she accepted. But then soon after, she consulted a psychic. The psychic tells her Angela should try and get Knowles out of prison. So Angela contacts an attorney named Sheldon Yavitz and convinced him to take Knowles' case. Angela's mother then paid $5,000 in legal fees to get Knowles released.
Wow.
Knowles told Angela he was in prison over a drug transaction gone wrong. Truth is, he was serving 3 years for burglary. But somehow, that lawyer managed to get Knowles released early due to some sort of technical error. Knowles was released May 1974, and Angela sent him money to join her in California. But once he got there, Angela said, quote, I just had a funny feeling about it. She knew something was up when Knowles showed absolutely no interest in the job that Angela had lined up for him. Angela then consulted a psychic again, and this time the psychic warned her about, quote, a very dangerous man who was entering her life. Angela took it as a sign. She ended the engagement and bought Knowles a plane ticket back to Florida. Angela then reunited with her husband.
Wow, but the
Ac-
damage was done. She got him out of prison. Like,
well, according to Knowles, on the night that Angela broke up with him, he went out and killed 3 people.
here we go.
Aside from that confession, no one has been able to verify whether or not that's true. But Knowles returned to Jacksonville, Florida the following day, where a few weeks later, he got into a bar fight during which he stabbed a bartender. Knowles was arrested and placed in a holding cell, but on July 26th, he picked the lock and escaped custody. Later that night, Knowles cut the screen on a first-floor window and entered the home of retired schoolteacher Alice Curtis. Knowles bound Alice's hands and feet and put a gag in her mouth, and then beat her to what police described as an excessive level. Knowles then took Alice's money and drove off in her 1971 yellow Dodge Dart Demon. Alice's son discovered her body the following day. According to the autopsy, Alice died from asphyxiation from the gag. She was 65 at the time of her death. And this was just the beginning of Knowles' killing spree. Over the next 113 days, he would attack at least 22 people, although he claims it was closer to 35.
I'm transfixed. I'm building a profile.
I hoped you would.
Riveted. Wowzer. Listen, let's take a quick break, hit the can, grab a drink, and we're going to be back with more on the Casanova Killer episode of True Crime and Cocktails. 2 on 3. 1, 2, 3. Welcome back to this episode of it's of True Crime and Cocktails. We're talking about the Casanova Killer. You know what it is? I'm so jazzed. I'm so excited. I was like, welcome back to the Casanova Killer episode. Like, I just could not be more into this because this is just a fascinating profile. As we know, I'm a hobbyist. I'm a profiler hobbyist.
Sure.
So I'm jazzed. Anyway, before the break, we were getting into the real horror show of this guy. What's next?
Oh, well, that was just the beginning of the horrors. So, in a taped confession, Knowles allegedly claimed that before leaving Jacksonville after the murder of Alice Curtis, he was responsible for 2 missing children. 6-year-old Mylette Anderson and her 11-year-old sister Lillian, who went by Annette, were last seen by their mother Elizabeth on August 1st. Elizabeth and her older daughter Donna left the house in Jacksonville, Florida around 6 p.m. to tend to a sick relative. Elizabeth's husband Jack was expected at home around 7. But Jack, who was a commercial fisherman, called the house at 7 and told his daughters he would be late because there was some sort of engine problem on the boat. But he spoke to his daughters and they were both fine at that point. Jack arrived 20 minutes later and his daughters were gone. There was no sign of forced entry. The house doors were closed but unlocked. The family's dog, which usually had free range of the house, was found unharmed, shut in a bedroom. Neighbors later claimed to have seen a yellow car, which matched the description of the car stolen from Alice Curtis's house in the area the night the girls disappeared. Now, Knowles claims that he strangled the girls and dumped their bodies in a nearby swamp. As of this record, Mylette and Annette have never been found. The taped confession that Knowles made has since been lost. So was he involved in this disappearance, or was he just trying to boost his own numbers? Honestly, it could go either way. The police believe the confession is false, because at one point he did tell them where the bodies were or where he left the bodies, and they went and looked and couldn't find them anywhere. So they just assume he was lying about being involved. He also could have been lying about where he put them. Could go either way. But if he was involved, I wonder if he was involved in a few others in the area that he has not been linked to, because Milet and Annette were two of 5 girls who went missing from that area between July and October 1974, which just so happens to coincide with the crime spree that Knowles went on. The first girl was 9-year-old Jean Marie Schoen, who was last seen leaving an arcade called the Hangout with a man who witnesses described as, quote, having hair like Elvis. Now, Knowles definitely had like a 70s rock star sort of hair, so I could maybe see that being considered like Elvis. I don't know. Jean was last seen July 21st. Now, Knowles was definitely in the area at the time, but I can't tell if he was in jail or not, because after he left San Francisco in June 1974, he went to Florida. And all I know is at some point he was arrested for stabbing that bartender, put in jail, and he escaped July 26th. But it seems like he escaped from a holding cell, so it's possible he was only there for a couple of days, which means he would have been out on the 21st when that girl went missing. I'm just saying. He also may have been in prison at the time. But the point is, as of this record, Jean Schoen has never been found. 12-year-old Virginia Helm was last seen September 27th. Her partially clothed body was found in a shallow grave a month later. She had been shot in the head. Knowles' whereabouts were unknown at this point. So if these missing girls' cases are connected, it is possible that he was involved. However, there was a 5th victim whose death could not have been Knowles. 12-year-old Rebecca Green was last seen October 16th. Her remains were discovered in a body of water nearly 3 years later. On the day of her disappearance, Knowles was committing a crime more than 1,200 miles away. But just because he wasn't involved in that one doesn't mean he wasn't involved in one of those others, especially when he confessed to killing the 2 sisters. And speaking of confessions, Knowles later confessed to the murder of 13-year-old Ima Jean Sanders, who was last seen hitchhiking in Warner Robins, Georgia on August 1st, which is the same day Annette and Milet Anderson went missing. Now, Warner Robins is about 4 hours from Jacksonville. Why I've now chosen to tell you the distance in hours, I don't know. But I'm pretty sure that's just the choice I've now made for the rest of the episode. And we're just going to all accept that. It's very Canadian of me. So Warner Robins is about 4 hours from Jacksonville. So it's more than possible to be in both cities on the same day. But the Anderson girls went missing around 7 p.m. So then, unless Ima went missing earlier in the day, it seems less likely Knowles could have done both, even though he has confessed to both. Ima's remains were found in a wooded area nearly 2 years later. Despite Knowles' taped confession, Ima was not officially identified until December 2011. In his confession, Knowles claimed he picked up a teenage hitchhiker and sexually assaulted her before strangling her and dumping her body in the woods. In the audio recording, Knowles refers to the victim as Alma. So police didn't connect that confession to Ima right away. So her remains were referred to as Jane Doe for decades. Ima's ashes were finally returned to her family in January 2012, 37 years after she went missing.
Wow.
And I know that since the 3 girls were all abducted on the same day in different places, it's tough to know whether both could have both been committed by the same person, even though he admitted to it. Again, the sisters were abducted late at night. 7 p.m. apparently is late at night to me. That's what age I am. it kills me. I don't know what time of day Ima was last seen. It doesn't seem plausible that he would abduct and murder the sisters, drive 4 hours to Georgia, and then murder again. I mean, if he was already out of Florida at that time, and then he got Ima first, and then took off to Florida and happened upon the girls, it's possible. But again, he we know he killed Alice Curtis on July 26th. Maybe he got out of Dodge, went to Georgia that night, and then killed Ima on his way out of town, and then went to Florida again. Again, he used a credit card and he was in 37 states in less than 2 months. So it wouldn't be a surprise if he's constantly back and forth between different states. So, I mean, it's more than possible. He also had a girlfriend who lived in Macon, Georgia, which is like 20 miles from where Ima went missing. So the idea of him being in the area seems again more plausible. And yeah, he had a girlfriend. He was seeing a single mother of three named Jackie Knight. They had been seeing each other off and on since 1970. Jackie said Knowles was very secretive about what he did for a living, but then he would admit to and even outright brag about committing petty thefts. Jackie said Knowles was very nice and he treated her and her children well. He often brought them gifts when he came to town. We'll get into that more later. But it's possible that Knowles only confessed to the crimes, even if he didn't commit them, just to make himself seem more impressive, which is gross, but it is common in serial killers. I only suggest the timeline because the day after the three girls were murdered, 49-year-old Marjorie Howie was strangled with a nylon stocking in her home in Atlantic Beach, Florida. Her husband discovered her body around 6 p.m. that day, time of death estimated around 11 a.m. Knowles stole a rifle and a color TV from Marjorie's house. His girlfriend Jackie later claimed that Knowles gave her that TV on August 4th, when he supposedly returned to town after a business trip.
Mm.
When police told Jackie that Knowles was suspected in several murders, she gave police everything that Knowles had ever given her and helped them on a timeline to figure out where Knowles was throughout the entirety of the killing spree. She said he spent the month of August in Georgia. She said he left August 22nd. The following day, 30 miles away in Musella, Georgia, Knowles forced his way into the home of 22-year-old Kathy Pierce, who was at home alone with her 3-year-old son, Joel. A neighbor who went to the house to check on Kathy discovered Kathy's body in the bathroom of the home. Her son was discovered in a bedroom, completely unharmed. Kathy had been strangled with a phone cord. Her time of death was around like 10:30 in the morning. A neighbor told police that around that time of day, a man knocked on her door, claiming to be looking for a woman named Betty Johnson. The neighbor outright refused to open her door and yelled basically to the man through the window that she didn't know what he was talking about and to go away. She gave the police a description of that man and the vehicle she saw him driving. The description matched Knowles and the car matched the one he stole from Alice Curtis. So the fact that that woman didn't open her door, it outright saved her life.
Yeah.
So Alice's car was eventually found abandoned in a hotel parking lot in Lima, Ohio. On September 3rd, Knowles met 32-year-old William Bates at a roadside pub called Scott's Inn. It's near a hotel where the car was located. The bartender, who knew William, said he saw him having drinks with a red-headed man, and the two of them left together. According to William's wife, he got called into work that night, so when he didn't arrive home later that evening, she reported him missing, and his car also appeared to be gone. About 3 months later, William's naked body was discovered by a hunter in a wooded area just east of Lima. He had been strangled. While using William's car, Knowles drove about 28 hours to Nevada, where he shot Emmett and Lois Johnson, who were vacationing in Ely. Both had been shot in the temple with a 38 caliber revolver, which was not found at the scene. Their bodies were discovered in a camper by a Nevada Highway Department employee who was emptying barrels at a rest stop. While Emmett was found fully clothed, Lois was completely nude. At the time of their deaths, Emmett was 62 and Lois was 59. His wallet and her purse were missing from the scene. While their bodies were discovered on September 18th, it is believed they were both killed on September 12th. That day, a motorist contacted Nevada Highway Patrol to say they heard screaming coming from a truck stop where the Johnsons' bodies would later be found. The motorist, who was just passing through the area, stopped at the nearest payphone to contact police. But the incident was not reported to the Ely police, which is technically closest to the rest stop. So just like no one bothered to look into the screaming.
Wonderful.
And it's just horrifying to think about. But,
Yeah.
Knowles then made his way about 830 miles south to Texas, where he came across 42-year-old Charlene Hicks, whose vehicle had broken down on September 21st. Knowles then raped and strangled Charlene before hiding her body in some brush behind a rest stop 14 miles east of Seguin, Texas. Charlene had been on a road trip and told her family she'd return home on September 22nd. When she didn't arrive, they reported her missing, and her body was discovered 2 days later. Knowles then drove 13 hours to Alabama, where he met 49-year-old beautician Ann Dawson at a nightclub in Birmingham. I love that I said Birmingham like we're talking UK. Birmingham, Alabama.
I like it.
There we go. Wowza. So he meets Ann on September 23rd. Locals reported seeing Ann with a man described as reddish hair, wearing white slip-on shoes with buckles and a gold digital watch. Those very shoes would later be discovered in the trunk of that Impala that the police were looking at the beginning of our story. Ann and Knowles were then seen leaving the CNS lounge together around 9:15 on September 23rd. 2 days later, her car was found abandoned 5 miles away. According to his taped confession, Knowles claims he abducted Ann from the lounge by knife point and strangled her and dumped her body in a swampy area. More than 3 years later, on November 15th, 1977, Ann's remains were discovered by 2 squirrel hunters in Meridian, Mississippi. That's like 146 miles from where she was last seen. If you think I was going to learn a detail about what those hunters were hunting and not tell you, also, if you
Yeah.
think that I didn't read it and first think squirrels found her, like unwell, like
Squirrel hunters.
squirrels that were out hunting.
Let's go. We gotta go find some nuts.
That's
Uh-oh.
absolutely it. Like
Yeah.
I was taken aback. I was like, how did the squirrels communicate? Nope. Like, I'm not even kidding. That's how far my brain got before I was like, oh, maybe we stop for the night. Like that's where I was
Yeah,
at, where I
I
was
get
like,
that.
that's unwell. So Anne was said to be carrying a large amount of money with her and was wearing 2 diamond rings the night she went missing, which is likely why Knowles was drawn to her. Police released a sketch of the man who was last seen with Anne before her disappearance. They didn't get any leads, but of course, the sketch does bear a resemblance to Knowles. According to credit card receipts, Knowles spent most of October on the road. He made stops in Oklahoma, Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota, and Virginia. He was also in Marlborough, Connecticut, where he bound, raped, and strangled 35-year-old Karen Wine and her 16-year-old daughter, Dawn, on October 16th. Karen's other daughter was the one who discovered the bodies the following day when she returned home after a sleepover. Police discovered Knowles had stolen some vinyl records and a tape recorder from the house. And yes, You are correct. Around the time this tape recorder was stolen, Knowles started making an audio history of his alleged kills. The tapes were mailed to his lawyer, Sheldon Yavitz, the very man who helped Knowles get an early release in May 1974. We'll get to Sheldon and those tapes in a bit. But now, before I can fully move on from Karen Wine, I have to mention a really bizarre side note that I found. It doesn't affect the story. It's just if I find it, I have to tell you. It's kind of how it works. Squirrel hunters.
Thank you.
So, in the mid-60s, Karen was a widowed mother of two. She meets a man named Edward Wine Jr. while she was working at a coffee shop. They get married, and then the summer of 1968, while he was working as a sonar technician for the Navy, Edward allegedly agreed to give classified U.S. submarine information to the Soviet Union.
Whoa.
According to the Navy, Edward wrote out notes containing secret data pertaining to submarine patrol schedules and confidential technical schematics about U.S. nuclear subs, and then placed the notes in a crayon box and allegedly threatened to shoot anyone who prevented him from sharing those secrets.
Wow.
Edward was arrested while on his way to the Russian embassy in New York.
That's wild.
In December 1968, Edward pleaded guilty to mishandling classified material and was sentenced to 3 years and given a dishonorable discharge. Edward then started drinking heavily to the point where he was arrested twice on charges of breach of peace. He and Karen divorced soon after. Espionage is not something I was planning on bringing up in an episode about a serial killer, but
No.
that's where we're at. And one more thing about Karen Wine before I move on to Knowles' other crimes. Knowles stole vinyl records from Karen's house, and he gave them to his girlfriend Jackie, who lived in Georgia. And Jackie, of course, once she found out who he really was, gave the police everything that he had given her and was like, whatever I can do to help, here you go. And when they looked at the vinyl records, they noticed that the albums had a label on them, which had Karen Wine's name and address on them. And since the crime happened before DNA testing, the police kind of had nothing to go on in the case of Karen and her daughter. So if Knowles hadn't stolen those records, police never would have been able to link him to that crime.
Fascinating.
So I'm always intrigued by when they do something dumb.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just assuming he didn't look closely enough at them, but I'm fascinated. So, 2 days after brutally killing Karen Wine and her daughter Dawn, Knowles heads over 400 miles to Woodford, Virginia. There, he shot 53-year-old Doris Housey in the head with her husband's rifle, which he left next to the body. There was no sign of forced entry, no sign of burglary, no sign of rape, which kind of just indicates he killed her for the sake of killing. Knowles then made a 17-hour journey from Woodford down to Key West, Florida, where he picked up 2 hitchhikers. Apparently, at some point, he was stopped by a police officer for some sort of traffic violation and let go with a warning. The interaction with that cop scared him so bad that he dropped off the hitchhikers in Miami without harming them in any way.
Wow.
Which, I mean, thank God for those people. But imagine if that cop had run the plates on the vehicle and discovered it was stolen. Maybe some lives would be saved, or maybe Knowles would have fled the scene and the hitchhikers would have been killed. I mean, who knows? And while Knowles let those 2 hitchhikers go, he then, after letting them go, picked up 2 more outside Macon, Georgia on November 2nd, 23-year-old Edward Hillard and 20-year-old Debbie Griffin accepted a ride from Knowles, and days later, Edward's body was found near the road. He had been shot multiple times. A shirt and some things belonging to Debbie were found near Edward's body, but there was no sign of Debbie. Her remains were discovered 9 months later in August 1975, about 5 miles away. There were 2 bullet holes in her skull. 4 days after the deaths of Edward and Debbie, Knowles headed to Milledgeville, Georgia, where he met 45-year-old Carswell Carr, which I'm already fascinated by that name. But he meets Carswell at a bar. The two men have drinks together, and Knowles convinces Carswell to let Knowles spend the night at his house, even though they're practically strangers. Knowles then tied Carswell's hands behind his back with a curtain cord and stabbed him 27 times with a pair of scissors, which were found at the scene and had been wiped down. According to the autopsy report, Carswell suffered a heart attack during the incident, which is his official cause of death. He had taken medical leave from work because he suffered a heart attack a year prior. Carswell's 15-year-old daughter Amanda was discovered in her own bedroom with a nylon stocking wrapped around her neck and a second one shoved down her throat. The pathologist later said the stocking was so deep, it took him 15 minutes to remove it.
Oh my God.
Knowles attempted to rape the girl after her death, but he was not successful. So the bodies, which were both nude, were discovered in their own bedroom the following afternoon around 3:20 p.m. by their wife and mother, Ellen. She was a nurse who left the house the night before to work a double shift. She said when she left, Amanda was studying and Carswell was watching election results on TV. Ellen said the house had been ransacked. Police stated that based on the amount of damage, they initially believed they were looking for multiple offenders. Furniture had been overturned and thrown around. Mirrors and picture frames had been shattered. Some of the furniture had been slashed open with some sort of knife or sharp implement. Carswell's briefcase, shaving kit, credit cards, and almost all of his clothing were missing. And so was Amanda's Mickey Mouse watch and a digital clock that had just been violently ripped out of the wall. The following day, Knowles put on some of Carswell's clothing and went for drinks at the Holiday Inn bar in Atlanta, where he met journalist Sandy Fox, which brings us back to the beginning of our story. The idea that this man brutally murdered a man and his daughter, and then the next day tried to pick a woman up at a bar wearing the dead man's clothes is something that I didn't see coming. As stated earlier, Knowles and Sandy parted ways a few days later, and Knowles went on to abduct 31-year-old Barbara Abel from her home in West Palm Beach, Florida. Barbara later said that Knowles seemed to have multiple personalities because he would be calm and relaxed one minute and then would absolutely fly into a rage the next. She said his eyes turned absolutely cold and evil whenever he spoke about killing. She described him as kind of like Jekyll and Hyde. On the drive, Knowles asked Barbara about her job. She said she was a copywriter. He asked her if she'd ever written a book. She said no, but maybe she could, and he suggested maybe one day she could write a book about him.
Same thing he said to Sandy.
Same thing. They only made it as far as Fort Pierce, Florida, which is like an hour away-ish. They checked into a hotel claiming to be on their honeymoon. Barbara said she was raped repeatedly before he walked out around midnight. Barbara was tied to the bed, but was so terrified he was going to return any second that she waited hours until attempting to get out of the restraints. 37 hours after being taken, Barbara was finally able to contact the police. She told them she was heading to Georgia, or that he was heading to Georgia. Police were shocked that Knowles let Barbara live, but it's probably similar to Sandy. He hoped both would write books about him because deep down he wanted to be famous. And sure enough, both women did end up writing books about him. Sandy released a book in 1977 called Killing Time, which claims to tell the story of 2 weeks of love and terror. And I get that people fluff their books a bit to help them sell. But it wasn't 2 weeks, it was 3 days. And it certainly wasn't love.
It doesn't sound like it was terror either.
That's true. I'm
For those 3
assuming
days.
she mean it was terror once she realized who he was? Like, it's just, again, I get it. She wanted to sell a book. Oh, hey, I love that. And during their time together, it doesn't seem that Sandy was in fear at all. So I also wouldn't say it involved terror. Hey, there we go.
I read your mind.
You did, and I wrote these long enough ago. I had forgotten. But again, it's Sandy's story. It's not mine. So you do you, Sandy. The book was re-released in 2004 with a new title, Natural Born Killer, In Love and on the Road with a Serial Killer.
Mm.
In the book, Sandy not only mentioned that Knowles was bad in bed, but she also said he had given her a Mickey Mouse watch, which she later realized Knowles had stolen from Amanda Carr, which was one of his teenage victims. Barbara Abel also wrote a book. Hers was called One Survivor and was released in 2021. There was a part of me that was like, 2021, this happened in 74. That's a while to wait. I kind of assume she waited until her sister passed before releasing the book, is what I thought, because maybe it would be too much for her sister. I could be making too much of it, but her sister did pass a couple years before that. So just a thought. But hey, again, it's your own journey. You take however much time you want if you're going to write something, So Knowles abducts Barbara on the night of November 14th and left her in a hotel on the morning of November 16th. Police were still on the lookout for Barbara's vehicle. A 35-year-old Florida Highway Patrol officer named Charles Campbell pulled Knowles over because he spotted that car around 8:30 a.m. just south of the Georgia state line. When Charles approached the car, Knowles pulled out a sawed-off shotgun. Numerous passing motorists later contacted police to say they witnessed a man on the highway holding a trooper at gunpoint. Knowles forced Charles into the back seat of the police car and drove off. But knowing a police car would be easily spotted, Knowles had to switch vehicles. So when he came across a car, he turned the lights on, because he's a cop car, right? Pulls the other driver over. Knowles then took the trooper and the driver of that car hostage. A hunter witnessed the entire thing, but didn't get a license plate number. He was, however, able to tell police that Knowles and his hostages were traveling in a blue Ford car. When Knowles stopped at a gas station to buy cigarettes, the employee said he recognized Knowles from an FBI photo. So he got the vehicle's license plate number and contacted police. It was discovered the car had been rented a few days prior to 29-year-old environmental engineer James Meyer, who was in town on business. The rental car was next spotted by a sheriff's deputy near McDonough, Georgia, around 1:15 p.m. on November 17th. Knowles was the only person in the vehicle. A roadblock was set up to stop him, but when the officer tried to shoot out the tires, his gun jammed. So Knowles just drove straight on into the roadblock, which wrecked the vehicle. So he had to flee the scene on foot. Another officer shot at Knowles and it grazed him, but he continued running into a nearby wooded area. More than 100 officers started combing the area with helicopters and bloodhounds. Knowles went to a farmhouse for help, but was apprehended by 27-year-old David Clark, who had been hunting in the area. David yelled for a neighbor to call the sheriff, and David managed to hold Knowles at gunpoint until police arrived. Police asked for the whereabouts of Charles Campbell and James Meyer, but Knowles refused to say a word. The following day, a hunter discovered the bodies of Charles and James in a wooded area outside of Hawkinsville, Georgia. Both men had been shot in the head at close range, and while there were handcuff impressions on their wrists, there were no handcuffs found at the scene. It is believed that Knowles handcuffed the men around, like wrapping their arms around a large tree, and then he executed them both and took the handcuffs and left. I don't know. I assume he thought he'd use them, because otherwise, why take the handcuffs at that point?
Yeah.
I assume he had plans he wanted to be prepared, I guess. I don't know. So Knowles was charged with 7 murders throughout Georgia, Florida, and Ohio. He's expected, or at least connected to, another 17 more, at least. So police, once they get him in custody, they spend the next 3 weeks interrogating him hard, because they're trying to find out how many murders and assaults he was actually responsible for. He, of course, wouldn't tell them a thing. So the officers ask, where is Charles Campbell's service pistol? The officer that he abducted and then murdered. They believed that he used Charles' weapon to shoot both Charles and James. And the gun kind of was the only thing that could officially link Knowles to the murders. Knowles finally agrees that he will show them where he threw the gun. So on December 18th, Knowles was placed in the back of a police car. Sheriff Earl Lee was the driver, and GBI agent Ronnie Angel, which is one of my favorite police names I've ever heard.
Yeah, that's good.
Sat in front, or he was in the front passenger seat. They started to drive along the I-20 in search of the place where Knowles allegedly disposed of that murder weapon. Now, I'm not police, so I have nowhere to stand on this, but for whatever reason, they decided to take a serial killer who once picked a lock and escaped a jail cell in a vehicle that did not have a cage or any plexiglass between the front and back seats. So then, when Knowles snuck a paperclip out of his sock and unlocked his cuffs, he was able to reach over the seat and attempt to grab the driver's gun. There was a struggle over the weapon, and Agent Angel managed to fire 3 shots, fatally wounding Knowles, who was 28 at the time of his death. On December 19th, it was revealed that Knowles had been making audio recordings confessing to his crimes. It was said in those tapes, Knowles confessed to 16 murders across 7 states. He first started recording the tapes after he stole the tape recorder from Karen Wine on October 16th in Connecticut. He officially started sending them to his lawyer 2 days later, 2 days after the murder of Doris Housey in Virginia. I don't know what happened to that stolen tape recorder, but according to a store clerk in Georgia, Knowles bought blank tapes and a new recorder in early November using a credit card belonging to Carswell Car. Knowles' lawyer Sheldon Yavitz said that after helping Knowles get an early release in May 1974, he didn't hear from him again until October, when Knowles called him from a bar in Coral Gables, Florida, and said, quote, "Brace yourself, I'm a mass murderer." Sheldon claimed he was concerned that Knowles would kill him for knowing too much, so Sheldon suggested Knowles confess to his crimes, on a tape recorder. Which feels like such a random thing to say. Sheldon offered to hold on to the tapes until after Knowles' death, which Knowles believed was imminent. Sheldon agreed to not listen to the tapes and simply stored them in a safe in his house. He said he was instructed to release the tapes after Knowles' death. Sheldon later said he should have called the police, but didn't because of attorney-client privilege. When Knowles was arrested, he told the police about the tapes and admitted that Sheldon had them. Police requested those tapes, and Sheldon said no. The police then had to get a subpoena for the tapes. Sheldon still refused, so Sheldon and his assistant, who was his wife at the time, were put in jail for contempt. Sheldon served 48 days, only agreeing to release the tapes so that his wife would be released. Speaking of Sheldon and his wife, in 1965, Sheldon was a 26-year-old lawyer with his own law practice. A 23-year-old waitress named Patsy Sexton became his first client. She was in a bitter custody battle over her 2 children with her ex-husband, who was a state trooper. Sheldon helped Patsy get into beauty school. He helped her get full custody of her children. And then in 1968, Sheldon and Patsy got married, and he raised her 2 children. And then they had 4 more children together. During their divorce in 1989, a judge ordered Sheldon to turn over his financial records. He refused. The judge threatened to put him in jail. Sheldon said, quote, "Your Honor, I once served 48 days in jail for a mass murderer. How many do you think I'll serve for myself?" Somehow that worked and the contempt charge was dropped.
That's wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't get the law.
I don't either. Sheldon's courtroom luck would soon run out. He allegedly set up an offshore account for a client who was a known drug smuggler. When the client was later indicted for failing to pay taxes, he threw Sheldon under the bus. And Sheldon was arrested for tax evasion and money laundering. In 1993, Sheldon was found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. So, in the Knowles case, Sheldon eventually gives up the tapes. They were apparently only listened to once by a judge and a Georgia grand jury. Transcripts were made. They apparently got leaked at one point, but the tapes have since disappeared. And the transcripts were destroyed when the courthouse they were stored in flooded. I'm a couple episodes ahead of this for my writing. And in that case also, it's another, and wherever this stuff was being stored, the place flooded and it's destroyed. And I was like, that happens a lot more than I think, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
Isn't that interesting? Prior to them being destroyed, the transcripts made it possible for authorities to identify Imogene Sanders, who had been unknown for more than 30 years. So, I mean, at least the tapes did something while they existed. Knowles often bragged he killed closer to 35 people. Authorities have so far confirmed 18 to 20. I love that they still can't even tell for sure. Authorities in Montana, California, and Arizona have since requested photos and fingerprints of Knowles in the hope of solving some of their own cold cases. Something else of Knowles that was recorded was a conversation he had with a psychologist. A very short clip was posted online. In it, the psychologist asks, if you could live your life over again, would you? Knowles said no. He said, quote, "There's no way I could go through another year of it. I fully intended to be shot before I was arrested." When asked what was the worst thing that has ever happened to you, Knowles responded, quote, "The worst? I was born."
Mm-hmm.
He added that nothing good had happened so far because he was a criminal and had been since he was a kid. When asked about his parents, Knowles said, quote, "I realized there was maybe not a lack of love, but a lack of caring. So I had no doubt they loved me, but they just didn't give a damn." He added, quote, "Perhaps they did give a damn. They just didn't know how to show it." I will remind you that when Knowles was just 8, he got caught stealing a bicycle and his parents put him up for adoption. I'm sure there were other things going on as well. I'm fascinated by that dynamic. In his will, the one that the police found in that car,
Yeah.
Knowles left everything to his mother. And after his arrest, he wrote letters to his parents, which were addressed to Mama and Daddy. One letter was written on hotel or Holiday Inn stationery and dated just 5 days before his death. Knowles wrote, quote, "Just a few lines to say hello and let you know I'm feeling fine and in good health." It's the fact that he's trying to be so casual as though they write letters all the time, which I kind of got the feeling that they didn't. Maybe I'm wrong. There was also a letter dated December 5th that read, quote, "If they convict me, they will probably sentence me to the chair. But please don't let that worry you because they will never be able to execute me. It will be changed later to a life sentence. Of that, I am certain. So please try not to worry about it, okay? Just remember that the Father is still holding my hand and he is not about to let them kill one of his children."
Now he's bringing God into it?
Yep.
Okay.
How can you possibly believe that God will not let you be put to death because you are one of his children, and yet God allowed you to kill 20 or more of those children? It does not make sense. Maybe he believed he was more worthy than anyone else. Maybe there was a mental illness or just straight up ignorance, arrogance, all of the above. I don't know. But he kept the record of his kills because he wanted to be famous. He told his lawyer, Sheldon, that the tapes would be his legacy and he was going to, quote, "put Georgia on the map." I don't believe that Georgia asked or even needed your help, sir, because when I think of Georgia, the first thing I think of, is the song because Ray Charles did.
Georgia.
Yeah, that's the first thing I think of.
Georgia.
And I'll be honest, prior to, I don't know, a week ago, if you'd asked me to list everything I knew about Georgia, not even close would I have ever mentioned this man.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that worked out for him. But I wish that Knowles had survived, not only so that he could actually serve time for the crimes he committed, but so that he could live with the fact that the general public has no idea who he is. Because again, prior to choosing this, I'd never heard of him. His disturbing plan apparently didn't work, which just then makes the loss of life in the case that much more senseless. The last thing I have to add, his nickname, the Casanova Killer. Where the hell did it come from? From the best I can tell, it's based on the fact that he met a few of his victims in public and then charmed them into leaving with him or letting him in their house. But we're talking like maybe 3 or 4 people out of like 20 or more. So I don't feel the name was warranted. I also wish we'd stop giving brutal killers nice names. Casanova? No. No, I just can't. It's fine. I'm reporting for True Crime and Cocktails and I'm Christy. It's all fine.
Listen, I got to tell you something.
Yeah.
And I'll get into this more after the break, but I got to just tease it because
I can't wait.
the amount of times I wrote in my notes the word legacy.
Oh.
At one point I said, famous? He wants to be famous? No, he wants a legacy. I wrote this multiple times. So that when you said that, I was just like buzzing because I was like, yes, I got this
Yes.
guy's card. I feel like I've got a firm grasp on this profile and I cannot wait to share it. So hit the can one more time, grab another drink, and we'll be right back with my unhinged sentiments on the Casanova Killer episode of True Crime and Cocktails. All right. Clap 3 on 3. 1, 2, 3. Welcome back to this episode of True Crime and Cocktails. We're, of course, discussing the Casanova Killer. So many things to talk about.
Yeah.
So many things to get through. This whole story is fascinating. Of course, I'm like, when did he have his frontal lobe trauma? Because it feels like that is, of course, got to be a part of this. But more than that, I just got to say from the beginning, at age 8, he stole a bike. So his father put him up for adoption. To me, and look, we don't know a lot about what happened before that. We don't know a lot about, those kinds of details. But to me,
Sure.
that is the crux of all of this.
100%.
All of this, because, and listen, I'll get into all of my nuanced thoughts as I go through these, but yeah, number one thing to me, legacy. Why does he want legacy? Because he doesn't have one. His family gave him up. He ended up getting bumped around from foster home to foster home. He ended up in the different whatever they were called, the
Reformatories.
reformatories and whatnot. You have no legacy. There is no family kind of connection. It's kind of like, when people take on the family business, it's like that's a part of like a familial legacy. When
Sure.
he was, essentially abandoned by his family, I feel like that made something in his brain go like, I have to make a mark because I'm not special. My parents don't think I'm special or good enough, so I have to make a
Yeah.
mark. I have to leave a legacy. And of course, it got twisted into something horrific. But that's the beginning of my thoughts. All of it is about control. I think a lot of what he was doing, I think the fact that his MO changed was because he was experimenting. I think he was
Oh,
hoping that he would feel a certain way, and when he wasn't getting that feeling, I think he changed it up
that
again and again.
makes sense.
Because in the other thing that speaks to that is when the psychologist said to him, "Would you live your life over again?" And he said, "No, I couldn't keep it up that long. I thought I would have been shot before I got arrested." So what that says to me is that I don't know that he loved the killing,
Interesting.
which by the way, also, as I've referenced many times on this show, Jeffrey Dahmer was openly like, didn't love killing. He wanted to fully control people. He didn't love the killing, it was kind of a means to an end to him. But the actual act of the killing, he always said he didn't love doing. So, I feel like there's something to that here. I don't
Sure.
know that he was necessarily enjoying it. I think he thought that maybe he would, like, that the power and the control would be things that made him feel a certain way, but I think ultimately it didn't any of it make him feel the way he thought it would, which is why he started changing it up and trying different approaches. Um, but again, more on that as I go. Okay. So we know there's ones that we know that he killed, and there's ones that are a little bit up for debate.
Murky. Sure. Yeah.
Murky. The two kids that went missing, the Annette and Milet kids, I mean, I guess for me, I'm just like, why would he have targeted them? How did he find them? But I guess we do know that he has a pattern of like knocking on doors. And
Sure.
then so that I'm like, okay, I can buy that. I don't know. I just wrote down, is he exaggerating his kills? Because at the beginning, arguably, his first known kill was Alice Curtis, right?
Right. Yes.
And we know that she asphyxiated from the gag.
Right.
So we don't know that he intended to necessarily kill her. It could have been that
Right.
she died as kind of like a result of the attack. So then I'm like, is there no MO at this point because they weren't all him? Is he glomming on to some of these killings that weren't his, that he was trying to like beef up his resume for lack of a better term?
Oh, yeah, I could see that.
Again, the teen hitchhiker, is there proof that he killed her? Was there DNA? These are just the questions. These ones all
Nope.
I just was like, I don't know. Again, could have absolutely been him, but I also just feel like at this stage, I wrote down, when's the next confirmed kill that we know was his? Right?
Oh, sure.
Because what I'm trying to do again is like,
I
rather than
can s
building this timeline, I'm trying to build the profile of
they
how
s
his
they
MO
seem pretty
morphed.
certain that Marjorie Howie on August 2nd and
Yes.
Kathy Pierce on August 23rd were his.
Yes. Those to me felt like, okay, now listen again, I'm not negating these other killings, obviously. I'm just trying to like sort through state of mind. So
Sure.
It's interesting that he has this girlfriend, Jackie, who has 3 kids, and he doesn't attack or kill any of them. But they need him, right? And she talked about how he treated
Sure.
them well.
Yeah.
So, again, he would bring back these gifts, he would do these things. It's interesting to me that he was scratching the itch of wanting to feel things in different ways. And that wasn't enough for him, so then he turned to assaults and killings and whatnot. But I
Right.
think it's also an interesting detail that we know that he had a hard time getting aroused, at least with, Sandy Fox, because to me, again, firmly speculating, only speculating, I cannot speak, but I bet you that was a recurring theme, and I think that's why he was continuing to change up his MO, because I think
Oh,
he thought that he would feel so powerful and so much control that he would react in a certain way, and we also know that there was one of the assaults that it was said that he wasn't able to follow out.
right.
We know that there was ones that happened before the killing, there was the attempted one after.
Mhm.
To me, it feels again like he's chasing something and he's trying all these different ways to feel it and it's not happening. That's what it feels like to me. That's what was coming out
Yeah.
to me throughout this story. The fact that he tried it with men as well as women. The
Yep.
fact that the ages changed. I think he really was like, this is going to make me feel whatever adjective. And then every time he did it, it didn't. So that also can explain the spree nature of it. That in past other spree killings, it's like they get a bloodlust, right? And they want to keep going. They want another one. With him, I don't know if that's true. I think that it was like he's desperately chasing a feeling and he's not getting it. So it's like he's got to keep going. He's got to keep trying it. And it also feels again like he knew he was going in as a suicide mission. Like he said, I thought I would
Yeah.
be shot before I was arrested. Like he wants this legacy. The fact that he was recording tapes of what he had done, the fact that there was a will sitting in the back of his car, like this guy, this was a kamikaze mission, right? He was
Oh,
not
yeah.
coming out of this. So I think for him it was like, well, how much can I get away with in what amount of time and what does it need to be to kind of like fulfill whatever kind of, you know, feeling he's trying to get. Again, sometimes it's a married couple or the couple of hitchhikers together. Sometimes it's a single woman, sometimes it's the older age, sometimes it's younger. Then there's the kidnappings where he doesn't kill them. I mean, it's fascinating. Um Always robbing them, always taking things. I mean, that's not uncommon. That makes sense. With Kathy Pierce, her son was unharmed. But what's
Yep.
interesting is then later when it was Carswell and Amanda Carr, he also killed the daughter. So
Yep.
again, to me, this is it's interesting also that in that case, not only was Kathy Pierce's son unharmed, but we also know Barbara, who he kidnapped earlier, or I might be messing up the timeline later. Um, Barbara's son was also left unharmed. Interesting
Yeah.
that he's protecting the young boys when he was a young boy who maybe was not protected. Isn't it?
Interesting. So then I'm like, the girlfriend that he had, did she have all boys?
I would be very curious to find out.
I'm also, and I mean, I doubt she would ever say, but I just want to ask her, did you two ever have sex? Did he ever try to? Or is this like he he was nice enough to you, he treated you well that you were like, we don't need it.
Well, here's the other thing. Listen, now we're really going to get into it. I don't think I've ever gotten into to this depth on this show. But there's also listen. The intimacy requires vulnerability, right?
Sure.
So, and I'm not talking about sexual assault for a second, to be clear, but I think there's also a possibility that, yeah, I mean, I think that this is such a part of this in such an interesting way where, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Was he able to be fully vulnerable with her? Probably not. So it would be very interesting to know. Again, if it were me being the FBI profiler in real time, these are the questions that I would ask because, again, it's just interesting to see how the human brain handles these kinds of things. Obviously.
Oh,
So
yeah.
he made the audio recording of his kills to send to his lawyer. That's the first time I wrote in all caps, he wants a legacy. That's the first time that I wrote that. To me, that was
Sure.
clear. Um, Here's another thought. Doris Hosey. shot with her husband's rifle. There was no forced entry. And we know that in every single one of these cases, there was no forced entry.
Right.
I wrote down, and I almost chilled myself with this one. He wants to convince all of his victims that he's good. Part of this, I think,
Sure.
even more so than actually doing the crimes, the violence.
Right.
I think part of what what did kind of get him off, for lack of a better term, was pretending that he was good and then turning. Because as a child, you could argue that he was acting out, arguably, potentially, to get attention. So he was arguably good, but acting bad to get attention. And that
Sure.
didn't work, and it got him sent away. So the way that his brain rewired was, well, then I want to pretend that these people think I'm good. And then
And go the
joke's
other
on
way.
you. Gotcha. You can't trust me because I am bad. And that's all that childhood trauma,
Oh, sure.
right? I just think that that's the crux of this. I think the
Oh, it
crux
has to be.
is wanting people, is earning someone's trust and then killing them and then assaulting them. Like, because it's this, that's the one piece of the MO that it's not every single time, but I bet you if we knew the details of him getting the hitchhikers, all of the above, it's him ingratiating themselves. I think that's the big core piece of this, is that
Oh, yeah.
he wanted to pretend and see what it felt like to earn someone's trust and then break it, because his trust was ultimately broken in the most epic way, right? He did something bad and then
Oh,
his
yeah.
parents literally gave him away. I
Oh
mean,
my God. The amount
such
of
an abandonment
times,
move.
the amount of times that like when you and I are even having our therapy sessions
Of course.
and I'll say something of, you know, just the way I am now. And then it's like, oh, it's because of this from my childhood. It's things that people think aren't big deals. It's like, oh no, that shit builds us into who we are.
Yes.
And
And to be
how
clear,
we react to things is how it's just how we become who we are.
100%. And to be clear, I'm not saying any of this to try and justify any of his actions at
Of
all. I'm not
course.
saying that it's like this justified what he did. It's always for me just trying to understand why somebody does something that they do. And yeah, that's the thing. Something that's also very small to us as a child can like have rippling impacts for the rest of our lives, for
Oh,
decades
yeah.
of times, deep into adulthood. So the idea, when there's something as traumatic as being a young child and being given away because you did something bad. Again, I'm not suggesting that that was the only thing. I think that that also speaks to perhaps what that household was like leading up to that time. I mean, it's a
Sure.
pretty, anyway, again, a speculation, but yeah, I think that sometimes we underestimate in ourselves and in others the true impact that those things can have on someone's life. And I would also argue that if we went back and we had the information, he probably had a frontal lobe trauma. I think it's probably pretty
Oh,
certain.
sure.
Um, so now Carswell Carr, the man at the bar, stabbed him 27 times with scissors. And then the daughter, he had jammed the pantyhose so deep in her throat, the pathologist took 15 minutes to get them out. What I wrote down here was his anger is escalating.
Sure.
And at this point, he's been in this how long? I'm just trying to read here. He's been in this 1, 2, 3, 4. He's in like month 4 or 5. I think A, he's trying again, I think he's trying something else. I think he's trying like, do I need to be more violent? Is that what it is? Is that what's going to, because that's also when he attempted the assault but didn't. So again, it's
Right.
like, was that his experiment there? Is it just that he's like, man, why am I not getting caught? I think he also really, I mean,
Oh,
we know he
sure.
wanted to be caught,
He did.
which mirrors again doing things as a child, acting out to get caught to get attention, right?
Right.
He's just doing that in the most massive way possible to get a legacy, to get attention. I mean, the mirrors, I mean, it's again,
Right. I mean,
um,
Barbara, the woman that he abducted, and then kind of went on the run with, he commented or she commented that while they were in the car, he was constantly changing the radio station, trying to hear if there was news about them being said yet.
right,
And he was getting more and more angry when there wasn't anything.
right.
Dude, that's all he wanted.
Right.
He
He was
wanted the
chasing it,
attention.
yeah, since childhood.
Yeah.
And again, the legacy that comes along with it.
Yeah.
The fact that he was wearing Carswell's clothes when he met
Hmm.
Sandy is chilling, absolutely chilling. Now, my question is, and this is one of the big ones, why didn't he kill Sandy? Is it just because she was a writer? Like a journalist? Is that
It's
it?
it seems like that's the only reason he left Barbara alive.
It's just, I don't know. That one is like really interesting to me because he also offered to drive her such long distances. Like, I guess it could just be that, but I would love to know more about his state of mind during that time because it's interesting to
Sure.
just pause a spree killing. He just paused it and then went on a very long 3-day road trip with a woman.
It seems like an odd choice for some of the things that he did, yeah.
It's interesting.
So, and who knows, and I also, the fact that his fiance breaks up with him, he claims he went out and killed 3 people. And then after this 3-day affair, she ends it abruptly. And he's just like, okay. It's amazing to me he didn't go kill somebody then.
Well, I also don't know that I believe that he killed 3 people that night.
Oh,
I
I
don't
don't
know.
think
I
so
I I
either.
think that again, he's trying to paint himself into some sort of something that I'm not suggesting he didn't kill a lot of people. He did, but I think I don't know if I believe that.
Oh no. Police can't verify that. As far as I can tell, they can't verify 3 victims that would have been killed that day in San Francisco. But
No.
I
But again,
just,
but this also speaks to like she hurt me so bad I went and killed 3 people. It was her fault. Lack of vulnerability, right? Lack of like
oh, sure.
not wanting to say like I was so hurt or whatever. It was more, oh no, no, no. Well, she did this. She made me do it. Okay, dude. Um, yeah, why didn't he kill Sandy? And again, the fact that he followed her around like a puppy dog and would like sit in the car for
Right?
hours waiting for her, like it just goes, it's just very interesting to me. I mean, again, perhaps it really was just the value of her being a journalist. I don't know. That
I'd
was
also love to see a photo of Sandy side by side with a photo of his mother.
mhm, great point. Absolutely.
He went after an older woman.
Yeah.
The fact that she was like, if they're not 20 to 25, I won't touch him, seems like she was maybe a little no nonsense. And she was probably like, hey, this is how this is going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting, right? Um, the fact that the last kind of hurrah, for lack of a better term, was a state trooper and then the other gentleman, James Meyer. I mean, again, like again, you start going for you start cop killing. This is the beginning of the end. Like,
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like now it's escalating. To me, that's another escalation. It was a very different style of killing as opposed to the like 27 scissor stabs. Um,
Right.
but it's an escalation, like killing a cop. Like it's game over. Like they will find you. They will like we know this from doing this show long enough. Like it just is what it is.
Right.
So to me, again, knowing that he had also said multiple times that, he didn't think he was gonna make it through it alive, that's just to me, that's just him taunting, trying to get caught. The fact that he had a hidden paper clip which got him out of his handcuffs, but also he got what he wanted. He wanted to be
Huh.
shot to death. He
He did.
wanted that to be a part of it, and he had planned for it. He had already sent those tapes to his lawyer.
Already signed a will.
Already signed a will. This is again, like, this is what he wanted. Um, the details also about his lawyer and he and his wife going to jail, like, this whole thing is fascinating to me. Um, the tapes were only listened to once, and then disappeared. The transcripts were destroyed in a flood. To your point, can we just start keeping all records in, like, a fireproof, flood-proof building? Is that possible? Guess
I
not.
think that'd be great because it seems to be cropping up.
Yeah.
It just seems like everything wouldn't that be great if we still had that? Oh, but we don't. You
No.
remember the flood. It's like every time? Okay.
Do we? Um And then what I just wrote, which was similar to kind of what you said, was I love that his legacy didn't happen the way he wanted it to. Obviously, I want justice for any of the victims that he may have
Of
admitted to and
course.
actually killed. But it is, there is something interesting about the fact that he went to so much trouble to try and maintain this legacy, and then it didn't turn out the way he wanted it to. And then finally, I have to just speak again to these psychologist questions at the end because it's fascinating. Would he live his life over again? No. Interesting. Worst thing to ever happen to him, being born. Yeah, this is again, we're really painting a picture here.
Mhm.
Thought he would have been shot before he was arrested. Yep. The fact that he left everything to his mother, he was writing them letters. And then I just wrote he had to create a legacy of his own because he did not have one from his family. I mean, this is fascinating. Again, I'm buzzing. All of this to me is just so interesting. And again, because it feels just so literal. It feels like there's just such a clear line between his actions and the childhood stuff. I mean, fascinating. A great
Oh, yeah.
choice on your part.
Yeah. Look, I didn't know about the childhood stuff until deep in it, but yeah, I mean, I did slightly kick myself at the beginning where I started looking in and everything I found was like, nothing is known about his childhood. And I was like, God damn it.
I
I need
know,
to
it's
know
all
if
we
there's a
want.
frontal lobe.
Where is the frontal lobe trauma?
And then I found the thing about when he was 8, and I was like, shit, yep, there you go. That'll do it.
And like I said, I think that I would find I don't think it would be like the first way that this father ever tried to punish that child was putting him up for adoption. It seems to me
Oh,
like
no,
it
there was
speaks
something.
to a lot happening there. Listen, amazing work as always. Truly riveting. Could not have enjoyed this more. In the only way that we can enjoy true crime.
Of
I
course.
enjoyed the psychology of it. No, everyone who
Of
listens to the show knows that.
course.
But we thank you for your work as always. A 12 out of 10 out of the park.
Oh, it's an honor.
And
It's an
the
honor.
pleasure, the honor is mine. And we thank you, dear listeners, for joining us on this wild ride. If you haven't already, give us a follow on the socials on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at True Crime and Cocktails, on Twitter at Not Detectives. If you'd like some bonus content, some additional bonus episodes, a live monthly Q&A, all of the above, go over to patreon.com/True Crime and Cocktails to learn more about our subscription-based service over there. And of course, the only place for official True Crime and Cocktails merch is, of course, truecrewmerch.com. So check that out as well if you're interested. Christy, do you want to tell the people about next week's episode?
On the next True Crime and Cocktails, tall, hot, blonde.
If you haven't seen this one yet, folks, wowzer, buckle in. What a story. Cannot wait. Christy, do you want to say goodnight to the people?
This one's tough. I'll say it. Good night, Rasmus Ristolainen.
Your commitment to this bit is fantastic.
I have to manifest cup for my boys 2024, baby.
Listen,
Have to.
on that note, good night to her cup.
Thank you.